Tortoise, I'm reminded there's a story that told about John F. Kennedy, who apparently invited all the living Nobel Prize winners for dinner in the East Room at the White House, and said to them he'd never seen quite such an assembly of intellectual talent. Certainly that room hadn't seen it since Thomas Jefferson dined there alone. A brilliant way of flattering them and putting them in their place. I have to confess that when I saw the group of people that Suzanne and the Heywood Foundation had brought together, I felt a little bit of the intimidation that he must have felt that evening. It's an extraordinary group of people. I just wanted to give you a heartfelt welcome to our newsroom. So for most days, and most of this day, this is the area where we at Tortoise try to take a different approach to covering the news. It's slower, it's intentionally more open, and it's interested in what happens next. I was lucky enough to know Jeremy and a person who cared deeply about what happens next, and so when Suzanne got in touch and said, not only are we going to try and take the spirit and ideas that he brought to government and to public life, is there a way that we could do something together? I said, we'd do anything, because we would love to be the place where this conversation is held, where this celebration happens. But I should also say, journalistically, we'd love to take an interest in what happens next. So when it comes to the prize winners, the thinkers behind those prizes, if there is a way of taking that forward and telling the story of those ideas when they hit reality in practice, we'd love to be a part of that too. I think there is a kind of new world for journalism, a world in which we're not just sitting around worrying about the state we're in, but thinking about how we might change it. And it's hard to think of an undertaking quite like the undertaking that you've made, Suzanne, and quite like the undertaking of the Heywood Foundation, that has really put its mind in a consistent and thorough way to try and think through what happens next. So I am going to go and do what I imagine quite a lot of people are going to enjoy doing this evening, sitting there with my jaw on the floor thinking, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And the originator of all of these good ideas, of course, has been you, Suzanne, so I will hand over to you. Welcome.
Brilliant, thank you, James. Well, I think we're going to start with a video just introducing the foundation and this year's prize. Welcome to the Heywood Prize 2022, hosted by Tortoise Media. The Heywood Foundation was set up in memory of my late husband, Jeremy Heywood, who believed in two things very passionately. First of all, innovation in public policy, and secondly, in diversity. So the foundation has been set up to pursue both of those aims. Jeremy was the Cabinet Secretary for the UK and the head of the civil service, and during his time in that role he was able to work for multiple different governments, 4 different prime ministers. The Foundation's mission is to promote public policy, to try and create new good public policy ideas, innovation in how the government works, and through that also to try and find ways to promote diversity within the public sector. The Foundation is fulfilling its mission at the moment through 2 different things. First of all, it is holding public prizes to try and encourage people to come forward with really innovative ways to change public policy in the UK to make life better for all of us. The Foundation is also looking for fellows, and we currently have a fantastic fellow in Jonathan Black, who are going and spending some time outside of Whitehall thinking about long-term policy ideas and how those could be improved. The idea that won the Heywood Prize 2021 was a fantastic idea, and that was to create a reserve force for the NHS, very similar to the Territorial Army. The idea being to try and get doctors and nurses and other medical professionals who were retiring, or people who wanted to train with medical expertise, to do that with a small amount of support, so that when the UK is faced by a crisis like COVID or a natural emergency, we would have a reserve force of people who could come in and help the NHS. I'm delighted that since that idea won the Heywood Prize, it's actually been implemented by the NHS, and we now have a reserve force ready to help the UK in a time of emergency. This is the second Heywood Prize, and we decided that we were going to innovate ourselves as well as asking our entrants to innovate. And we've done that in a number of different ways. First of all, we've deliberately this year created a youth prize in which we're going to award, as you'll see today, some special prizes for younger entrants, and we've got some fantastic entrants in that category. We've also tried to innovate the way in which we've run the prize itself. So first of all, we've been looking at the entries using AI. We've also asked the people who've been entering the prize to actually help us sift the ideas, and they've done a very good job of doing that. In fact, we found that a more successful way of sifting the entries than we did using AI. And thirdly, we asked ChatGPT to submit some entries for the prize. Now, you'll be glad to know that at least this time, those entries didn't get very far. So the human entries have scored very highly. The ChatGPT entries, unfortunately, didn't make it to the shortlist. But we will keep on trying to look for ways to innovate the Heywood Prize. This year we've had almost 800 entries to the Heywood Prize across both the youth entries and the main category. We've had entries both in written form, but also we've had entries in audio form, video form and picture form. So a very wide array of different entries. Those entries have particularly looked at issues around mental health, but we've also had issues on environmentalism, and we've had issues around things like a possible youth Paralympics and how we teach history in schools. The entries to the Heywood Prize this year were not only sifted by the AI, they were also sifted by our entrants. They were crowd sifted by our entrants who did a very good job, and I'd like to thank them for that. And they were also sifted by a team of professional sifters who volunteered a lot of time to read through our entries. And I particularly want to thank those members, those people who work for the Bank of England, for McKinsey, for the Civil Service and for BCG, who gave up their time to sift the entries for this year's Heywood Prize. The shortlisted entries for this year's Heywood Prize were then judged by a panel of judges. We had 11 judges this year, and I'd also like to thank all of them for the time that they took to go through all of the entries. We had a number of very active judging sessions, some judging sessions where we really had some really pretty strong debates about the entries, and I think that reflects the quality of the entries that we had this year, which were very, very strong, but also the engagement that we had from all of our judges. So I'm really, really grateful to them for the time that they spent on the prize. So I'm delighted, after all of that work, that this evening we're going to be able to share with you our prize winners. I think we have a set of absolutely fantastic ideas, which we are very excited about. And following this evening, we will be sharing them widely within government. And hopefully, just like the last prize, we'll be able to come back to you in due course, and some of them will be fully implemented. I would like to thank our sifters, our judges, the people who've given up their time to work for the foundation, the board of the foundation, and of course, I really want to thank everyone who made an entry into the Heywood Prize this year. Everyone who entered will get a certificate, and our prize winners this evening will get a medal. And I hope the UK will actually get a new set of great policy ideas, which is going to make this country better for all of us.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to see everybody here this evening, and we're really excited about the prize winners this evening. And I'm not going to talk anymore. It was bad enough watching myself on screen. So we're going to get straight into the prize winning, and you'll be glad to know I'm not awarding the prizes. We've got a whole group of people who are going to do it. We particularly selected people to award the prizes who are relevant for the prizes that are going to be awarded, because we're very much hoping that they're going to be part of making those ideas become reality, or at least considering whether or not those ideas can become reality. So before we get on to the main prize winners, we'd like to announce the runners-up, and we're going to start with the runners-up for the youth prizes. Now, we're going to put the names up in a moment on the screens. If your name is on the screen and you happen to be here, just stand up and we'll give you a round of applause. Wow. Woo. Thank you so much. So at the end of this evening, before you go, make sure that you collect your medals because you've each got kind of medals. I also want to say that the ideas that we had some fantastic ideas, everything from synchronizing traffic lights to all sorts of things. All of the ideas that were shortlisted for this year's Heywood Prize are going to be available on our website after the ceremony, and they're all searchable because the idea is that they become a resource that both the UK public sector and indeed any public sector can go and search for ideas and inspiration. So they'll all be there. So all of the runners-up will get a medal and also a certificate that you can get from the website as well. So many, many congratulations. So now we're going to do the runners-up for the main prize. And I should say all the youth prizes also went into the main prize, of course. And we're about to put up the runners-up for the main prize. So again, if your name, and there's 15 of these, so I think there's going to be 3 screens of them rather than 2. If your name is there and you happen to be here, please stand up and we'll give you a round of applause. Wow. Fantastic. And again, thank you so much for some more brilliant ideas that are all going to be available on the website. And please, before you leave, make sure that you collect your medals and you can get your kind of certificates from the website. And we will send out the medals for anybody who wasn't able to be here this evening. So with that, we're going to move on to some of our main prize winners. And we're going to start with the 3rd prize for the main competition. And for the 3rd prize, we have, announcing this, a very old friend of mine, Robert Swannell, is going to come up and present this prize. Robert, as well as being the chair of UK Government Investments, you may also know him. He used to be the chair of Marks and Spencer's, HMB as well. And prior to that, he spent 30 years in investment banking. So we thought he was a particularly appropriate judge to award this prize. So thank you, Robert. Thank you for coming this evening.
To say I spotted somebody else at the back with a tie, which was really good. But I'm sad to say this isn't a Marks and Spencer tie, but all the rest is, every bit of it, which is probably too much detail. We saw some fantastic submissions. Some of them were incredibly interesting and quite intricate, and some of them we thought would be difficult to implement. But the 3rd prize that we're going to hand out now was for something that was both wonderful in its impact, but also in its simplicity. And that's really what attracted us to this particular idea. And it's an idea for preventing fraud in banks, and it was the idea of Raoul Wedge Thomas. And if he is here, do step forward to accept your prize, and well done. Very good, fantastic. And there you go. And I think we're now going to see a little video of this wonderful
I'm Raoul Wedge
idea.
Thomas.
Is that right?
I'm retired now and doing quite a lot of travelling and things, but prior to that, I worked within marketing and business consultancy, and it was within that area that my idea initially sprang up. And my idea for the Heywood competition is simple to implement a fraud reduction idea. It came to me when I was working with a large commercial website. It was really about the fact that lots of scammers tried to gain access to this site, and they did this by producing fake websites that looked similar. So the idea is really that by the banks, instead of everything that the banks do at the moment, which is for them to verify you, if they gave you the opportunity to ask for 2 letters, then you would also know that they were actually the bank before you gave out your full information and security details to them. I personally believe in the idea because I've seen what happens when people don't use this sort of idea, and I know people who have lost money, and also people who've given out user names and passwords. So I've seen what can go wrong, and I also know that what can work because I've been doing it myself, and I haven't therefore been scammed when I remember to do it. But if it came from the bank or something and they prompted you, then you wouldn't forget. You'd think, yes, I know I've got to give my 2 letters, but I've got to ask for 2 letters as well. And I think therefore it would work.
Robert, I mean, I think it's a great idea, very, very simple idea, and we will make sure that we communicate that idea to everybody that we know in banking, and hopefully they will take it up, because I think a simple way of people being able to identify that the bank is calling them is just a very, very good idea. Now, as a marker of how many great ideas we had this year, we actually got into a bit of a deadlock on what was going to be our second place. And eventually, after quite a lot of discussion, we decided that we had a tie for second place. So we actually have 2 second place winners this year. We'll obviously award them both the kind of second place prize. So I'm really, really glad that we have Phil Cliff here, who's going to award the first of the second place winners. Phil is, well, he does many, many things, but in particular, he's a trustee of the Samaritans, which I think is particularly appropriate given that this is an idea around mental health. So, Phil, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you. This winner has come up with an idea that we're calling, or he's calling, Grand Minds, and it's a mental health matching service bringing together the over 60s and people with mental health issues. And I'll just say a little bit about why, from a Samaritan's perspective, that's such an important idea after we watch the film. But I should tell you who the winner is. So the winner is Harry White. Is Harry here?
My name's Harry White. I'm a civil servant at the Department for Education. If anyone at the DfE is watching, the DfE is amazing, and big shout out to the DfE. I also run a podcast part-time in my spare time, so that's a little bit about what I do. So my idea is, the title for it's called Grand Minds, and the idea of it is it pairs up elderly people or people over 60. So it pairs up people over 60 with those who have mental health challenges, and they can then offer them some listening and basic counselling services. And the idea of the name Grand Minds is that obviously minds to do with mental health, but also grand, kind of, you start to think of like grandparents, and the picture on the front of it is a grandma, and also the idea of like grand being good, so like improving people's mental health, but also helping hopefully to tackle loneliness is a big part of what I want to do with it as well. At the moment we're in a real mental health crisis, particularly over the last few years. You've had COVID, you've had cost of living becoming more difficult, and I think anything to help with tackling mental health is incredibly important. And at the same time, you've got a real epidemic of loneliness, particularly amongst the over 50s. So, for example, Age UK, the charity, has said that if we don't tackle loneliness by 2026, you're going to have over 2 million people over the age of 50 who are experiencing intense loneliness. So I think this scheme would be a real way to tackle both of those things.
Thank you so much. Well done, Harry. Thank you so much, Phil. So we're very, very conscious that this idea is one of the ones that will need to be trialled very, very carefully, and we'll need to make sure that the people who are providing the support get all of the training and support that they need. But we think it's a really, really interesting idea and a really nice way to connect across the generations. So we do hope that it gets trialled, and we think it could really make a difference. So we now come on to our second place winner. How confusing is that? So I'm delighted that we have to present this award. We have Fiona Ryland. So Fiona Ryland has had a huge career in HR, but is now the Chief People Officer for the whole of the civil service. And you'll see in a moment why that is particularly appropriate for this prize. Fiona, thank you.
delighted to be here. And when James from the Heywood Foundation sent me a bit of information on this entry, I made him send me all the information because I was quite excited about it. So I just want to say a few words about why I think it's such a great idea before I ask our winner to come up. So this entry is about introducing a senior fast stream that will help us deliver for the public and the challenging workforce ageism. And why I think this is such a great idea is, like a lot of organisations, the civil service is struggling to attract enough talent that we need, but certainly in certain professions. And very interestingly, I was speaking to the Office of National Statistics that was sharing some data with me around how the number of people that are over 50 who are retiring or going to semi-retirement after COVID has increased. So I think there's a real opportunity here to match where we've got some of the in attracting people that are older back into the civil service and the workplace. So I'm delighted to announce that our winner is Alex Marsh for his senior fast stream entry.
My name is Alex Marsh and I work as a government economist. After a period of doing academic research on the relationship between the Bank of England and democratic accountability, I joined the civil service fast stream, working at the Department of Health and Social Care during the pandemic. And I now work at the UK's Competition and Markets Authority doing merger investigation. The idea is for a senior version of the civil service fast stream to keep the over 50s and their experience and their expertise in the labour force and to bring them into the civil service in particular. So the idea originally came from me talking to lots of the over 50s I know about their experiences of struggling to stay in the labour force amidst some big changes like digitisation, which were pushing them out. So the idea of a senior fast stream could firstly help keep a certain number of over 50s in the labour force and to bring them and their expertise and their experience into the civil service to help the civil service support the government of the day to meet the huge challenges facing Britain in the 2020s. Then there's also a second, broader ambition to turn the civil service into a role model employer of over 50s, and through that to drive cultural change across the economy against ageist working practices to make it easier for people to stay and work and enjoy their lives throughout their whole careers. I believe in it because I honestly think that it could really improve the lives of a lot of people I know over 50 who are currently finding life quite hard, and I think it could really make a positive difference for them.
Alex, I just wanted to say my team are already working on this, so it would be great if you could come and help us with that as well. Thank you.
You just recruited somebody. Yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, I think Jeremy would have loved that idea. After many, many years in the Cabinet Office, I think the idea of getting more talent into the civil service is a brilliant idea, and I really, really hope that it can come to something. So congratulations, Alex. Thank you, Fiona. Right, so we're now up to the first of our two big prizes of the evening, which is the winner of our Youth Prize for 2023. Now, I'm delighted that presenting this prize, we have Sarah Hughes. Sarah has had a long career in mental health, and she is now the Chief Executive of Mind, a job that she took up earlier this year. And so she's the ideal person to present this prize because this is another prize around mental health. That was a very, very big theme this year. So Sarah, thank you so much for coming and presenting this.
Thank you so much. How wonderful to be here. And honestly, those ideas are extraordinary. And I think I'll have to have a couple of conversations after this session. But let's do that later. Look, I was so pleased to be invited to give out this prize. I think primarily because I really understand that this intervention absolutely has the impact it's intended. It's well evidenced. I've seen it in action. In fact, one of my children is one of these. I'm not going to spoil the prize until we kind of get to it. But one of my children is one of these, and I absolutely know that it makes a huge difference to children and young people's mental health across the country. We need more of it. This idea year is about optimising this intervention and creating new partnerships to make it happen. It doesn't happen often enough anywhere across the UK. And so this entrance has identified basically the route in which it can happen. And so I feel really pleased to announce that Caris Taylor has won this award with her idea, Strength in Connection, the Transformative Power of Peer Mentoring in Children's Mental Health. Do come up, Caris. And we haven't got a video, we've got a live interview, I understand, so take a seat. This is very exciting. I'm not too sure everybody in the room will know very much about your idea, Caris. Can you tell us a bit about where your idea came from and what it is?
Yeah, so my idea is about peer mentoring for children and teenagers. So it's about really like utilising like friendships that already help with mental health and like kind of mainstreaming that nationwide.
Well, it is. I mean, absolutely understand that peer mentoring is an intervention that is still fairly new, although most of us in our lives know how wonderful it can be to talk to somebody that we know, that knows a bit about our experience. How did you come to submit this idea? I mean, what occurred to you?
So I've had experience with mental health services in England myself, and frankly they were abysmal, no help. And I found that it wasn't just me, it was many of my peers, and when I went to research it, I found that actually less than 1% of NHS funding is going into children's mental health, and there's actually been a £700 million cut in money going to like school nurses and public mental health services. So when I looked into it, I found that things like the Anna Freud Foundation have looked into peer mentoring, and there are loads of studies and research that backs it up and shows that peer mentoring is the way to go, and it's the way that children and teenagers feel most supported with their mental health.
Absolutely, and in fact I was at Westminster this morning having conversations exactly on these lines about how do we really respond to the crisis we see in children and young people's mental health. And so I wish I'd brought you along. I should have thought about that. So can you tell us, what are your hopes and dreams for this idea? Where do you want it to go?
So I want it to be implemented into government policy so it can spread nationwide. I want it to help everyone, because at the moment I think about 18% of children and teenagers have a diagnosable mental health condition, which is frankly ridiculous, and it is going to go up if we don't stop it now. So we need to prevent it from going up. So I think the government and Heywood Foundation is something that can really help me in implementing that.
That's fantastic. And I think what's really interesting about your idea is that you have suggested new partnerships that don't exist. Can you tell us a bit about that? Yeah,
so I looked into some like foundations at the moment that really obviously focus on children and teenagers. So one of that was DOV. So I'm sure a lot of you will know what that is. At the moment it looks like volunteering, expedition, but I thought about maybe implementing like a peer mentoring mental health scheme within that. So teaming up with foundations like Anna Freud to do sessions of maybe 3 sessions of 1 hour, so children can learn more about mental health, more about how to support their peers, and how to do that in a way so mental health isn't like a stigma, and it can be tackled head on.
Wonderful. And you will know that Anna Freud and the royal family are close friends. So this might actually be possible. So the influence is absolutely there. All of us in the room, absolutely, we must press the button on this. And just one last question. In terms of thinking about children and young people's mental health, today. We know that people are very likely to receive their mental health diagnosis before the age of 14. So 50% of children before the age of 14 know, 75% before the age of 24. So we're talking about a lot of children. What is the help that you would like us in the room to provide today?
I think it's really pushing with that peer mentoring policy. So not necessarily with the DOV, but with like loads of different partnerships. I think as a child with mental health, it can feel very isolating. So it definitely needs to remove the stigma from it, but also there needs to be government policy. There needs to be more money going to it. I mean, it is abysmal, the fact that there has been a 700 million pay cut and that less than 1% is going into it. So there needs to be government policy implementing the peer mentoring, and there needs to be kind of like a societal an acceptance, and it needs to be talked about more as well.
Thank you. My second child, who is a peer mentor, absolutely recognises how important it is and how much difference it can make. And so I think it's vote for Caris, frankly. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, and well done, Caris. That was fantastic. Really, really exciting. We're going to do everything we can possibly do to make sure that that gets implemented. So we've now got the second main prize for this evening, for the main Heywood Prize. And I'm delighted that we have here this evening to present this prize James Bowler. James has worked across multiple different government departments. I think he's worked for as many prime ministers probably as Jeremy did. I haven't done a kind of careful count.
This year.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Right, moving right along. Anyway, James, I'm delighted you're here because we have a Treasury-related winner this evening, which you're going to announce, so thank you very much.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I was managed by Jeremy for many a year, and I can absolutely attest to the fact that he pushed religiously for innovation, change from wherever it would come from with any part of the civil service structure. So there's so much coming through today that is very, very relevant to what he did. He was also very, very passionate about three things that are very relevant to the winning project tonight. Firstly, the legendary Whitehall silos. Jeremy was highly engaged in breaking down those silos and making sure that things could be cross-cutting and work right across Whitehall, not just in one place. Secondly, he was passionate about things working right through the nation, right through the United Kingdom, and devolution, and bringing the local to the regional to the national. And thirdly, he was very, very good at linking the public, the private, and the third sector. And each of those things sounds quite straightforward, but actually each of them is really, really hard to do. And Whitehall has been trying to address those things for hundreds of years. The winner of this prize does all those things. And the idea, and I'll leave you hanging as to who the winner is for a few more minutes, is for a UK community infrastructure bank. And the idea, which you'll hear a bit more about in a minute, is that as it stands, we have an infrastructure bank for very large projects, for very grand projects, but this misses the whole sort of community ethos, which binds quite a lot of our society together. So the much of the infrastructure at the moment, and much of the change at the moment is quite economic and quite national. But what about that smaller level, and what about the social, not just the economic? And the idea is that you could have an infrastructure bank that invested in local community projects, be it a village hall, be it a community centre, be it a pub, be it a local business, be it a centre of a village or town. and I think it's very much onto something that this is missing at the moment. But I shouldn't tell you about it. I should get the winner up here to tell you more about it. And the winner, I'm very pleased to announce, is Andrew Holland. Andrew, I'm going to interview you more about the things. So grab the mic and Andrew, congratulations. Tell us about it.
I think you've already given a pretty good description of most of it. Yeah, so it's a community infrastructure bank. So for those local community bits that are fundamental to how people actually live. So rather than motorways, whatever, which is where most infrastructure spending happens to go, but allowing the repayments rather than being directly, because a lot of the value chain for a lot of those isn't about charity making more money, it's about delivering value in those communities. So it's not just loans which you pay back directly, but also pay back through sort of payments that will increase tax income facilitated through it, or reducing costs elsewhere in the system. So if you're, I don't know, doing one of the many mental health services that have been talked about today, then reducing costs in healthcare and then allowing that to support those community infrastructure organisations that are supporting the healthcare system, and reducing costs to the NHS, and then being able to repay and provide flexible finance to those organisations to function.
Where did the idea come from, Andrew?
It was a mixture of things. So during COVID, there were obviously lots of infrastructure, sort of community groups struggling to cope, and the government helped with grant funding systems, but those are sometimes quite difficult to actually access and use, and they're definitely, having been volunteered to help with administering some of them, they're quite difficult to actually set up and run, and you don't necessarily know when they're going to come, you don't know necessarily when they're going to be, so actually trying to plan ahead is quite difficult. So both sort of listening to people struggling and to friends who are running some of them, and also having been on the admin side and seeing they're not the easiest things to run.
And Andrew, you're a civil servant at the moment. Whereabouts are you at?
I'm at the Home Office. Everyone's favourite.
Well, Treasury's got so many fans. And why the Heywood Foundation? Why did you submit the idea here?
I thought it was an interesting. You don't often in the civil service get to come up with completely your own policy. Generally, you're asked to find ways of delivering ministers. So it's an interesting a challenge, and working in a completely different area, it was quite nice to be able to look at it and think, if I was to go back to first principles, and how would I then redesign the system and change the tools that government has to deliver its policies, what would I do? And you don't tend to get asked to do that when you're a fairly junior civil servant.
Quite right. I think that's absolutely the core of this prize. So well done. So what happens next, Anne? What would you like to see happen next?
Well, it'd be lovely to see it happen. I mean, I'm not sure it will. I think it requires quite a lot of money to actually implement, and the fiscal headroom is a challenge.
I think that's why I was invited to.
I think so. I think you're here to tell me there's no money, and sort of finding parliamentary time might be a challenge as well. But it'd be lovely to see it happen, and see that then in the future be able to support community groups and be able to provide slightly more flexible funding to those groups in the future.
Well, I think it's a really excellent idea, and I think it's brilliant that someone in in the Home Office can come up with a really good start-to-end decision. I think it absolutely hits on a gap, and I would really stress all the cross-cutting nature of it. And I think so often at the centre of government we think of the large and not the small, and so often we think of the sort of generic way of change rather than binding those all together. So I think it's an absolutely excellent idea, Andrew, and I'd be really glad to continue the conversation about it. So congratulations, and let me give you your prize.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, many, many thanks to James, and congratulations to Andrew, congratulations to Karis, and congratulations to all the kind of prize winners this evening. So
really, that is the end of our prize ceremony. You'll be very, very glad to know that everybody's here in person. We now have drinks and nibbles. And I'd like to encourage everyone who's here this evening, everyone who's kind of watching online, do start thinking, because hopefully we will be doing another prize in due course. And we're always open to great ideas. And following on from this ceremony, as I said before, we're going to have all the ideas up on our website, so they're searchable, not just the ones that you've heard about this evening, but all the ones that were shortlisted will be available. And we'll certainly be following up and trying to make sure that as many as possible of the winning ideas are really considered by government, and hopefully some of them will be implemented. So thank you again.
Don't forget your checks.
Oh, well, checks will be sent out to the winners. Don't worry, we have all the... we will not forget doing that. James at the back has all the prize winners' names and addresses, and we will be sending those out after the ceremony. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here this evening.